Hello and what's up, political peeps? I am your host, R.I.P, and I welcome you back to another episode of the Geopolitical. Today is a huge day in terms of American politics. First of all, it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So thank you so much to Martin Luther King Jr. This episode is in part in memory of Martin Luther King Jr. Also, happy Inauguration Day. Have the feet up, checking out. Trump just took his at the time of this recording, Trump just was sworn in to office, and I'm gonna have more episodes talking about how he's gonna interact with the new 119th Congress, his weight in the Congress, his associations with people like Leader Scalise, Leader Thune, and Speaker Johnson, and kind of how the American government will be, particularly for the next 2 years of the 119th Congress, with Donald Trump and the Republican congressional majority and Republican congressional leadership. But it's been in the news, big thing lately, the TikTok ban. So this episode I came here essentially to talk about the TikTok ban, talk about the history of the ban, talk about why it's banned, and talk about the future of this ban, and if there is going to be a future for the app in this nation, the United States. So as many of you know from the viral clip, I don't know if you guys saw it, but it actually went viral on TikTok of that Senator Tom Cotton boasting and drilling the CEO of TikTok, Shou Chu, on the Congress floor, and essentially asking, is he affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party? Because he's the CEO of TikTok, which is a subsidiary of the overall parent company ByteDance, which is based in Beijing, China. So that's where the national security risks kind of originated. But ultimately, Shou Chu is Singaporean, but despite this, because of ByteDance being the parent company, it's been proven that there have been national security risks as well as mental health risks, because as you saw in that conversation between Mr. Chu and Senator Cotton, they were talking about how there's been mental health risks. Like, he mentioned that the app has glorified suicide and other, forms of self-harm to kids who were looking for like positive affirmations, which has led to them taking their own lives and stuff, and other dumb challenges like the blackout challenge. And there's also been accusations of like I said before, stealing people's data and using it to essentially attack the United States, that the Chinese Communist Party would do that. So people like Senator Tom Cotton have been huge proponents for this ban. Now, in April of 2024, the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, or PAFACA, passed through U.S. Congress. But that essentially means that if it is suspected to be harmful to the United States as a nation, the government can censor that material or can remove it from the U.S. market. But I personally think that's a slippery slope, because, first of all, what is considered a foreign adversary is, a loose definition. And of course, the Supreme Court deemed TikTok as something that foreign adversaries were using against the United States. But think about it. In North Korea, they think that the United States and anything not, praising Kim Jong-un and their supreme leader is considered a foreign adversary. So ultimately, I think that's a slippery slope, and the use of the PAFACA Act should be closely monitored. And depending on, right now the Supreme Court is largely conservative, so as well as the Congress and our presidency. So I feel like that act could be a slippery slope, particularly in terms of censorship in the nation. Now, TikTok removed its app from the Apple Store and the Google Play Store late in the night on the 18th. So I'm a CapCut user myself, which is another app under the parent company of ByteDance. I would say around 8 p.m. Eastern time on the 18th, which is Saturday night, the day before the ban was supposed to be activated, and that TikTok was not going to be allowed to be used anymore. CapCut went out. There was a message. I posted it on YouTube and on LinkedIn that essentially said, sorry, we're going to try to fix this. Rest assured, our CEO of CapCut and ByteDance and TikTok are working with the new incoming administration. But ultimately, since the Supreme Court affirmed on January 17th that the ban would be imposed, that led to these apps being scared and these platforms being scared, because ultimately, when the new administration was going to continue imposing this ban, that would lead to these companies getting fined or possibly penalized for allowing the use of TikTok, allowing the download of TikTok. So we were unable to use it for, I would say, about 16 hours overnight Eastern time, from the 18th into the 19th. Then President Trump posted on Truth Social saying, "Save TikTok." And as many of you know, President Trump has been a longtime proponent of keeping TikTok alive, because historically, the Republican Party and its presidential candidates have lost points to the youth. But Trump went on the Joe Rogan show. Trump did many other interactive activities with younger individuals, and those activities made their way to TikTok. So he thinks that TikTok was TikTok helped him win his election, and because of that, he supported TikTok, and he said that he would issue an executive order, which is something that essentially any president can do, and essentially on anything, there's very few limitations to what an executive order can be. But in this case of TikTok, Trump, now that he's inaugurated as of 50 minutes ago, to this recording, he can essentially sign into law that for 90 days the ban does not have to be imposed, and it doesn't have to be in law until the 90 days is up, and then fines have to start going out to providers that allow the use of the app continuously. Now, because of this message, TikTok and the CEO Shouzi Chu put out a message saying, "In agreement with our service providers, TikTok is in the process of restoring service. We thank President Trump for providing the necessary clarity and assurance to our service providers that they will face no penalties providing TikTok to over 170 million Americans and allowing 7 million small businesses to thrive. It's a strong stand for the First Amendment and against arbitrary censorship. We will work with President Trump on a long-term solution that keeps TikTok in the United States." Now, we'll get to the first part in just a minute, but yes, this isn't a long-term solution. These executive orders only last for a short amount of time. In this case, it's going to be 90 minutes. Trump also promised on social media posts that he would not penalize any platforms for hosting TikTok and allowing people to use this app, because he said that in his executive order he would detail that any app would be pardoned from all punishments related to allowing TikTok in this short period of time. But now that our President Trump has assumed office, we can expect by the end of the night Eastern time for him to sign into law that TikTok has 90 more days. But yes, this isn't a long-term solution. He will eventually have to either give TikTok 50% to U.S. ownership, or TikTok will ultimately have to be banned in the United States. That previous law, the PAFICA Act that we were talking about, and then the subsequent Supreme Court ruling on January 17th, stated that only 20% of the company could be owned by foreign adversaries, and in this case, that's China and ByteDance. So that would mean 80% would have to be owned by a US-based company or US-based individual. But Donald Trump said that 50% could be owned by the foreign adversary, in this case ByteDance in China, and he could find a way to situate it so that only 50% is owned by a US person. Now, people have talked about Elon Musk purchasing TikTok. Also, there was talk about Mr. Beast purchasing TikTok, but I personally don't think that's founded, because Mr. Beast is worth $50 million and TikTok is worth $50 billion to buy it in whole. So it's extremely unlikely that Mr. Beast would buy it, although he did TikTok posts and Twitter stuff on that, claiming that he was ready to buy it, but I think that's highly unlikely. Possibly Elon Musk will buy 50% of the company, but that's definitely something we can continue to monitor. Now, Trump posted to affirm all of this stuff on Truth Social. "I will continue an executive order on Monday to extend the period of time before the law's prohibitions take effect so that we can make a deal to protect the national security. The order will also confirm that there will be no liability for any company that helped keep TikTok from going dark by my order." So essentially, he's given these companies immunity, and TikTok also wants to care for the platforms, because the platforms ultimately do so much for them, because TikTok doesn't have its own smartphone. So without Android and Apple carrying TikTok on the App Store, TikTok wouldn't be making any revenue. So TikTok has to respect these different app stores and organizations. And with President Trump saying this, that gives them the buy to do that, and TikTok feels comfortable going back to the App Store. It was on Sunday morning on the 19th. They brought TikTok back slowly. ByteDance never really CapCut never really came back, but the web versions were generally the first to come back because that's kind of more independent. And then that was followed by the Apple version. There was a message that I just read before, and then on TikTok did officially come back to the App Store. But this all kind of created a divide in the Republican Party because people on the more conservative side, like Senator Tom Cotton, who was in that viral clip that I talked about earlier, came out saying, now that the law has taken effect, there's no legal basis for any kind of extension of its effective date. And when the ban was originally imposed and TikTok was rolling out, essentially, it was getting deleted from the different app stores on Saturday night. Tom Cotton celebrated the ban on Twitter and other social media. In addition to this, on Meet the Press, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, who's been working closely with President Trump and has faced accusations for essentially, um, you know, making the Congress like Trump's Congress, came out saying that he thinks we will enforce the law. So this really represents the extent of Trump's power over the Congress, and that at some point, these further right Republicans and even Speaker Johnson, who's not necessarily that far right and has generally been aligned with President Trump. President Trump endorsed Speaker Johnson in December and January, and he came out saying this. So ultimately, Trump doesn't have control of everything in the Congress, and I'm going to do an episode all about the beginning month of the 119th Congress coming later this week. But it is really important that we understand that Congress and the presidency should be different, and we need checks and balances. And I think this is actually a great representation of this happening. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is that Trump originally said that he was in support of the ban during his first term of during the first term of his presidency, and he now has taken that back. And Democrats and other people across the aisle are saying that's because he's working with Chinese banks, and they're kind of accusing him of, saving TikTok for his own advantage. Nothing's been proven concerning that, so we don't really know. And but ultimately, it's safe to say we're gonna have TikTok for at least 90 more days because it wasn't really enough time to sell TikTok, because the Supreme Court really affirmed that TikTok would be banned when they continued and affirmed that PAFICA would be valid on January 17th, which only gave a couple days for people to kind of sort themselves out prior to that affirmation that TikTok would be banned, and that buying it would be a legitimate thing that Americans would have to do if they want to keep TikTok. One more funny thing: Americans that use TikTok have began calling themselves refugees and have traveled to this other app called Red Note, and I think that's really funny because Red Note is actually a Chinese app that's heavily monitored by the Chinese, unlike TikTok, who has a Singaporean CEO who's not necessarily affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party. Red Note is an app continuously monitored by the Chinese Communist Party, and American refugees of TikTok have gone over to Red Note and essentially co-opted it. I was looking at some Red Note stuff and I saw like the low taper fade meme on that platform. So clearly, Ninja's low taper fade has traveled across continents. That just shows how massive it is, I guess. But back on a serious note, to the formal individuals who didn't understand what I was saying, memes have essentially traveled over to China, and now, I guess in an act of rebellion, these refugees have adopted a new app. But for the next 90 days, I think we're safe. We can see the inaugural ceremony is kind of wrapping up right now, and it seems that we are going to be getting an executive order in just the next few hours, and TikTok will be saved, CapCut will be saved, and these tools are just so important to small businesses in the United States. Over 7 million small businesses rely on ByteDance companies, so that's TikTok and CapCut, because other editing softwares, not CapCut, cost hundreds of dollars per year, and people can't afford that. CapCut is simple, and you can get high quality content, and ByteDance has done great things for the economy of the United States, and I think as a country we have to respect that. So thank you so much for ByteDance. Thank you so much to Mr. Chu and to President Trump for saving this platform that has done so much for the American economy. You guys know the drill. Peace out, political peeps. I'll be back to talk more inauguration stuff and 119th Congress stuff in the next couple of days. Peace out, political peeps.